This is Football at 4.
Players don't play their best when this is the issue. Like Jalen Hurts isn't playing his best because it's all the distraction around you that takes your attention away from the details of being productive. And whether we like it or not, when leadership fails, it's filled by something else. Right now it's distraction. That's why they're not playing well.
Jeff Saturday said that this morning, that it's the lack of leadership is now sprinkling down to the players. It's a Sports Bash Live. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget their YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. For those of you watching on the YouTube platform and YouTube, there's Geoff Mosher. Well, you see his face on the screen. He's with me now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN for another edition of Football at 4. Interesting bite there as we bring you in, Mosher. That basically he thinks is the leadership issues is now causing problems with the performance on the field. Do you buy that the coaching or lack thereof is possibly been a problem for this team?
Well, when he says leadership, is he talking about, I didn't hear the entirety of the clip, is he talking about leadership from the coaching or leadership from the veteran players?
It sounded like both. That there's not leadership in the locker room from the players and just leadership in general, yes, the coaching and the players. I guess it's kind of making an inference that, hey, Jason Kelsey's not there anymore. Fletcher Cox isn't there anymore. And then I know what the answer is. Well, they were losing with those guys here too.
They certainly were. I'd be very curious to know how Nick Sirianni handled certain things that have gone on since the loss. You know, I thought it was I don't get really too wrapped up because it doesn't matter on the field about things like Darius Slay tweeting his stats at people or going on a podcast. But I thought it was pretty tone deaf, just looking at it objectively, to go on a Dallas Cowboy podcast after that kind of a loss. I mean, I think if I'm the head coach, I have to talk to the team or talk to Slay and say, you know, you may not feel the way your fans do, but the paying customers or your diehard fans who are living and dying with every loss, right? They see you on a Cowboys podcast and it infuriates them. Of all teams, of all people, right? A Cowboys. So
it's the ultimate read the room. Like just read the room, man.
Yeah, tone deafness, and that's not a great thing. And if you're being that tone deaf, you know, in that situation, how are you being in the classrooms, and how are others reacting to that? How is C.J. Gardner-Johnson reacting to the fact that Slay was talking about him? So I would have to say, like, it's incumbent upon Sirianni or some other team leadership to kind of gather everybody together and say, hey, when things are going like this, don't go run into every single outlet you can go and, you know, live your life, but, you know, also have some sensibility about it. And
right.
I think that they showed a lack thereof.
Yeah, because then it starts the distraction of, okay, Slay goes on here, but not only does he go on there, which shows, okay, he's on the Cowboys thing, they're laughing, yucking it up after a loss, but then he's taking a shot at, you know, I don't want to say a shot, but I mean, then he's bringing up his own teammate, to which now Chauncey Gardner-Johnson gets involved.
Right, and so that is why I say it'd be interesting to see how the team responds, you know, going into the bye, how Nick Sirianni and team leadership addresses that, because then you can make an argument if it's just swept under the rug that, yeah, there is an accountability issue. There's just an overall team leadership issue there. If that really just is allowed to happen and continues to happen, as far as other, you know, how it's manifesting on the field, like, I don't think a lack of team leadership or accountability is why some of the things that are going on in the field happen, but that certainly compounds it when you're not playing well. And I do think coaching, as far as leadership from a coaching standpoint, it can be called into question. Even Vic Fangio, for as good as he has been reputed to be, I have some real questions about his defensive game plan against the Bucs.
One of the things, you know, you and Adam got onto at the latest episode of Inside the Birds, which you guys can check out on all podcasting platforms, you asked the question, is coaching the problem for the Eagles? Do they not know their roles? Do they not respect Nick Sirianni? Does he not know his role? We're 4 games in with new coordinators. It's not going the way that we anticipated. Now, injuries could be part of that problem. But how do you evaluate Nick at the quarter pole and how he's handling being a CEO coach?
It's obviously not going really well, but I can't put everything on Nick Sirianni. So he's got a lot of games here, especially the next 5 coming up, to get the ship righted, and that's a big part of it. I really do. I'm not like, I think people who are saying fire Nick Sirianni, I mean, they're 2-2. It's not 0-4, not 1-3. I get that they're coming off this terrible slide from last year, but there's issues right now with the roster, right? There were some off-season decisions made on how they were going to put this team together that have not worked out, and that may not be just on Nick Sirianni. And they can certainly play better, and I do think they will. I think that they'll make some changes. That's what the bye week's all about: self-scouting, looking yourself in the mirror. What are we doing poorly? Why can we fix that? Do we have to make personnel changes? And there'll be some changes. So it's really hard to evaluate after 4, not just 4 games, Mike, but also 4 games that have had a weird vibe to them.
Well, and how difficult is it for a new coach to come in? Let's look at the offensive side. He comes in, he works with the whole group of guys in training camp, and then a game into the season, really, after Brazil, that group that he worked with all offseason is no longer here.
Say that again. I think I didn't understand your question.
So we're talking about the offensive side of the ball. Kellen Moore, all offseason, he's got Brown and he's got Smith. Well, one game into the season, he doesn't have those guys. How much of an adjustment is that for him as the new coordinator to have to be like, I don't even have the guys I had all training camp?
Yeah, I was confused. I thought you said offensive line, not offensive side. And I'm like, it's really just Lane Johnson that was injured. But yeah, no, I mean, that's a part of it, obviously. You're missing your top 2 playmakers. The Eagles are an entirely different team when they have A.J. Brown, and he makes up for a lot of deficiencies elsewhere in the offense, and he can just brings a presence, a physical, intimidating presence.
Well, let me ask you that. Let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question, Moose. Is it as simple in your mind that if they're healthy, their offense will be fine?
No, it's not that simple. I mean, I think that it was very good against, in most cases, it was really good against Green Bay, right? They scored over 30 points. AJ wasn't available for the last 3 games, and you can see the difference. So I do think that they'll get right offensively when they are fully healthy, and they will be a good offense. Now, it doesn't mean they're completely cured. I think we need to see the sample size when that happens. Right now we have 1 game. Last year, they were fairly healthy on offense for the last, 6, 7, 8 games of the season. They still had trouble. So and to your point, without full health and learning a new offense and the pieces have to come together, it's probably been more difficult for Kellen Moore to do what he wants to do when he doesn't have his guys. But there's also probably an element to him not being able to do everything he's done in the past because now he's working with new offensive personnel, a different kind of quarterback. So we'll have to see what happens as the season goes on and the players come back.
We're talking with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. And let's stay on that offensive side. Kellen Moore, obviously, you just mentioned the quarterback, the dynamic between the quarterback and the coach and how important that is for this team's success. Where do you see that relationship at this stage of the season?
Growing, learning. I think that in the Packers game, and again, this might be because of more health, I thought you saw more motion with intent, more under center, diversified formations. We made a big deal about all those the 5 or 6 snaps you saw of the pony package with Will Shipley and Saquon Barkley. They ran a pony package play on the first snap of the game against the Buccaneers, and then you never saw it again. And that's after you didn't see it at all the 2 weeks prior. So I think that relationship is growing, and Jalen Hurts understanding where the plays are, what he needs to do, and Kellen Moore understanding where Jalen's strengths are, and when the games are real and it's not training camp, what his limitations are. That's a process.
Yeah, it's funny. Do you sense, Moshe, that people are becoming increasingly more frustrated with the coach or the quarterback or both?
Do I sense? It's like you're asking me if I've ever been on social media in the last 48 hours.
I don't know. Was the quarterback a popular figure and that he has lost support?
Yeah, and I think that always happens when teams lose or don't meet expectations. Even in times when the quarterback doesn't play terribly, when the team loses, it falls on the quarterback. And that's not just a Jalen Hurts thing. That's just an NFL quarterback thing. Same thing with the head coach. Fire the head coach. Fire the head coach. So I do. But I mean, listen, he hasn't played great either, Jalen Hurts. So I know people get annoyed by this, but it's like, look what the Rams beat the Niners 2 weeks ago. They didn't have Kupp. They didn't have Nakua. They scored 27 points, right? They don't have an offensive line that's healthy. And when they do have a healthy offensive line, it's not near what the Eagles' offensive line is. And in that game, the Niners scored 24 points. They didn't have Kittle, Debo, and Christian McCaffrey.
Is that because
that's the point? Is like you can't just keep using the excuse, you don't have this guy, you don't have that guy. If you're a good enough quarterback, you find a way to make it work, at least to be competitive. Maybe you don't beat the Bucks, but maybe you are more competitive and you're not fumbling and turning the ball over.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And my question was going to be, is that because Stafford's just that level of player that he's good enough to keep you competitive even with lesser players? Or is that McVay is such a good schemer, play caller that's why? You know what I'm saying? Both.
I mean, Stafford's a really good thrower of the football. They call him the wide receiver maker for a reason, right? I mean, he doesn't have Nakua, doesn't have Kupp. Jordan Whittington steps in last week, 6 catches for 68 yards. The guy's a rookie 4th-round pick that probably nobody even knew about before the season started. Tutu Atwell gets in there, gets catches. It happens. Juwan Jennings, same thing. Eagles trade for Jahan Dotson. Now, we've gone through Jahan Dotson's deficiencies. You and I have talked about it, Kaplan and everything. But he's still a guy who's played in the NFL for 2 years. And right now, what's he got? 4 catches for 25 yards or something crazy like that?
Yeah, he's been terrible.
Yeah, he's been terrible, and the ball isn't getting to him either. So that's my point. If you substitute a better thrower of the football in the offense or a better schemer, is Jahan Dotson at least catching a few more balls and getting open? Yeah, probably.
Let me get your thoughts then on the job Fangio has done through 4 games.
Not good. Not good. That we tried to give him the benefit of the doubt after the Atlanta game, because when you watch the tape of the Atlanta game, the defensive linemen they're just not getting any penetration. They're getting handled up front by a line, and you say, well, geez, it doesn't matter what front you're playing, 4-man front, 5-man front. If you're going to get blocked by offensive linemen, then that's a bad job by you as a player. I can't, for the life of me, understand. I can't blame him for missed tackles, but what Tampa Bay's offense is, because for 3 weeks, and who their offensive coordinator is. It comes from the McVay chain. He's going to run a lot of the same formations and plays that McVay runs, right? So they're going to be in 11 personnel. They're going to have receivers very tight to the line of scrimmage. And they're going to try to throw the ball quick. So why would you have your defense playing, giving so much cushion to the receivers when that's what they want to do? They want to run that quick game to the outside receivers as much as possible. And at some point, you got to tell your D-backs, stop doing that. Stop giving them cushion, right? Play up on him.
He said yesterday. He said he did yesterday, and they didn't listen.
If I'm a coach and my player's not listening to me, and I'm already down by 21, next guy on the bench, you're in.
Right.
And if you don't listen to me, you're out, and then the next guy's in. And those bench guys are hungry as heck to want to get in the game. Isaiah Rodgers, Keely Ringo want to play. They'll run through a wall for you right now because they want to play. So if Vic goes up to them, or Christian Parker goes up to them and says, you're going to get in the game, I don't care if you get beat 3 times, you will play press, you will play up as much as you can when the situation warrants it, or else I'm benching you also, then they're going to do it.
To hear that was a little perplexing. Like, really? Like, what's going on here is because he's a guy who, we think holds people accountable. We have this feeling that he's this old school guy, and you're hearing this, so you're like, wait a second, what? You're telling them to move up, you're playing too deep, and they're not really reacting to it. That was a little
like, how wasn't that the plan going in? How was that not the plan?
Well, that's never their plan generally, right?
Well, that's my point is sometimes you have to have that plan based on what your offense shows on tape. And the Bucs didn't do anything surprising. They didn't come up with their McVay-like scheme just because they were playing the Eagles, and the Eagles looked good the week before with all their defensive line pressure against the run, so they're going to come out passing. That's really what the Bucs generally do. So even if you're afraid of the explosive plays, even if you're afraid of getting beat and you want to play off for the first series to see how it goes, once you start getting carved up, you got to change. You got to do something different. He did start to blitz later in the game, but it was, I think, the late second quarter where Sterling Shepard, let's be real here. A guy signed off the practice squad who's never been healthy for the last few years. You got to dust the cobwebs off of him. On 3rd and 12, he catches a 17-yard pass where Quinyon Mitchell is nowhere near him. You just can't have that.
Yeah, it's very perplexing to watch them play defense sometimes, and in mid-game, you're like, how is this happening the entire game here? We're talking with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, and you wonder, like a lot of these guys, this is what, the 4th different voice they've heard as a coordinator that is running a variation of that defense. You wonder if the players on this team have lost faith in that scheme.
Well, that was it's interesting you bring that up. We talked about that on the Inside the Birds podcast this morning, right? Because everybody wants to fire the head coach, or everybody wants to fire the defensive coordinator. And aren't we having the same discussions about what's wrong with the Eagles defense that we have been having for several years? And not even just Gannon, but even before that with Jim Schwartz, about soft coverage, about, playing conservatively. I feel like, and I brought this point up, that sometimes it feels like it's an organizational philosophy that may start at the top, and perhaps there's some analytics that go into it.
Well, you would have to imagine.
I get that a lot of guys don't want to blitz. Like a lot of guys don't want to. It's very difficult in the league these days, just blitz all the time. But guys like Bowles and Brian Flores are really having success. And I feel like the Eagles would never really want that kind of guy to be their defensive play caller.
Which is wild, knowing, the history and just the fan base. Like, you would think, like, not that they want to appease the fans, but, like, you know what? Hey, let's try it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've gone down this road. This is who we've been. We haven't got to where the Jim Schwartz team won the Super Bowl, obviously, and they played like a wide 9, kind of a gimmicky type of defense, to win that thing. But, yeah, well, and look, the league evolves, and that's where I think that, the fact that I do think it's an organizational philosophy. Either Nick likes to play this style of defense, or this is what Howie likes, and you're going on your 4th year with this style of defense. The league evolves and changes, and it's almost like, all right, Vic Fangio has been running this defense for a while, almost like the Tampa 2. People started to catch on to it, and the Tampa 2 kind of went away.
Right. There's so many people who are sort of running this template too, and some are having great success and some aren't, which tells you that, personnel has a lot to do with it too. And the Eagles have been not good this year in the front 6. So that's got to be pointed out. But I always wind up talking about this a lot in the off season, especially seasons that end in disappointing records or an early playoff loss like last year. The Eagles do not help themselves out with their just perennial instability among the coaching staff, the position coaches, the assistant coaches. And I hate to go back because you just never know what the result is. But I feel like Eagles defensive backs under Denard Wilson played about as well as Eagles defensive backs have played over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Right. And they had a chance to make Denard Wilson, keep him there and make him the defensive coordinator. They didn't. They hired Sean Desai. That ticked off Denard Wilson, and then they lost him. So where does it go? Baltimore. What does Baltimore have last year? Not only one of the best defenses in the NFL, but also one of the best secondaries in the NFL. And now he's on Tennessee. I think he's the defensive coordinator for Tennessee now. And Tennessee's defense has looked pretty good. I'm not even counting the Miami debacle because Miami has no quarterback. But defensively, I think the Titans have been pretty good. But the Eagles didn't keep him, and they had a guy who was doing a good job. But year after year after year, you get a new D-line coach, a new linebackers coach, a new D-backs coach, a new assistant D-backs coach. I mean, tell me another team that has had so many different position coaches. I mean, what do they have, like 6 wide receivers coaches in 6 years until Aaron Moorhead recently has been able to keep the job.
Yeah.
They don't do themselves favors with this.
Well, which is funny because their wide receiver depth and the production from anybody other than Brown and Smith has been lousy.
Yeah, it has. It has. And we'll see what happens at the end of the year on that.
All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is we take a look at a lot of the offseason, the bye week, kind of self-scouting. Is right now, personnel-wise, do you think there's something obvious or, they're 4 games in, this is who they started with? Because a lot of times the bye is like 8, 9, 10 weeks in, and you're like, all right, you can make a change because you have this 2 weeks, you do some self-evaluation, and you can switch this guy here and switch that. Does that move exist right now?
Potentially, Mike. I mean, and I think that as doom and gloom as some people might be, sometimes it's just little fixes here and there, right? Just as simple as maybe playing a little bit more up, cornerbacks playing up might help your pass rush come alive, and all of a sudden pass rushers who aren't doing well are getting to the quarterback because the quarterback has to hold on to the ball a little bit longer because the receivers aren't getting free rides. So little things like that can help, but from a personnel standpoint, and you heard Vic Fangio talk about getting Cooper DeJean sort of closing in on the slot role. So you get Cooper DeJean in there over Avonte Maddox, who's been struggling. You get Sidney Brown back, and you can put him at safety in certain packages, at least to start off, and maybe gives you a little bit more sure tacklingness, I guess. I don't know what the word is, but he's, Sidney Brown, one thing he can do is run and tackle, and that was an issue. So all of a sudden, you got, a new safety, new nickel, maybe a new defensive approach to tighten up on the outside a little bit. Then maybe that helps your pass rush. You're going to play Cleveland. You're going to play New York. You're going to play Jackson, all these struggling teams, Cincinnati, right? That's where the recipe and the components are in place to start to see bigger turnarounds, which we see all the time once teams start to figure out what they need to do to start masking their deficiencies and playing better. So I can absolutely see on the defensive side some major improvement just on those little things alone, at least for a little bit, until then the league starts to then react to what you've done. But, just to get back on track, and of course getting healthy on offense will just naturally, you would think, help the offense improve.
In your mind, what's more likely? This team turns it around, fixes it, and this is all for naught, or do you think there are some deeper problems with coach, quarterback, coordinators, and just a lack of talent, that we maybe over. Yep.
Yeah. If I had if I had to bet a lot of money on it and somebody forced me to, it would be to turn it around, because at the end of the day, Vic Fangio has been a defensive coordinator for a long time. I know he knows what he's doing. I do think the offense at full strength can score points. Kellen Moore has been a proven coordinator. So I would bank on the resumes here. And I know some signings haven't worked out. Devin White hasn't worked out. Bryce Huff hasn't worked out. He doesn't have the biggest resume, Bryce Huff. But in general, the organizational resume here, I would bank on the Eagles being a playoff team. I don't know if I'd put them in the class of the Lions and the 49ers, but, we talked about, I didn't have them in that class going into the year. I thought they were a little bit lower. So I do think that they will figure it out. They'll take advantage of the schedule here. If I had to, bet my life savings on it, it would be that over just a complete collapse.
All right, Geoff Mosher and the Inside the Birds podcast. A new one is out. Check it out with him and Adam. And, of course, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. We'll talk to Mosher on Monday to get ready for the Eagles and the Browns. And, of course, that game is right here on 97.3 ESPN. The Browns got all sorts of problems as well, by the way. So you're right. The Eagles play the Browns. They play the Giants. They've got a schedule coming up that if they don't right the ship, well, then we might have some problems. Moshe, enjoy the rest of your week, buddy.
Mike, how many people are going to run to their local sports book now and put a lot of money on the Eagles collapse because I said the opposite, right? And they're like, well, if Moshe's saying this, then I'm going to go throw it all on a collapse.
Good. Yeah, you're right, man. All right, good stuff, brother.
See you, buddy.
There's Moshe here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4, 97.3 ESPN.